Good morning, West Creek Eagles.
I'm Zakoya.
I'm Renaya.
And I'm Sydney.
Today is February 21st, 2018. Now let's cut to the lunch and breakfast menu.
Don't push me. Today for lunch, we'll be having turkey, bacon, personal pizza, personal cheese pizza, Italian turkey sausage, spaghetti, bento box, turkey, pepperoni pizza, raw squash cones, broccoli, personal clementines, chilled pineapples, 1% low-fat white milk or chocolate.
Today for lunch we're having muffin tops. No, today for breakfast we're having muffin tops, hard-boiled egg, peach diced cup, mixed berry juice, 1% low-fat white milk or chocolate milk.
When the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh,
Benjamin Banneker can best be described as a mold breaker. He was born in 1731 in Ellicott's Mills, Maryland. As a child, he attended a Quaker school, one of the few institutes that offered integrated education, and he put what he learned into practice. At just 15, he developed an irrigation system for his family farm. When he was 21, a friend gave him a pocket watch, which he promptly took apart to figure out how it worked. But he was not simply satisfied by understanding the mechanism. He needed to make his own. So Banneker built his own clock from scratch. And it was so well engineered and the mechanism so precise that it struck on the hour, every hour, for the next 40 years. Banneker's clock gained him a reputation, catching the eye of a famous clockmaker, Joseph Ellicott. He helped Ellicott build a complicated clock, and in return, Ellicott loaned him scientific books and instruments for astronomical study. He taught himself everything there was to know about science and math, particularly astronomy. He began using what he learned to predict weather patterns and plan agricultural methods. He even predicted a solar eclipse in 1789, successfully contradicting many notable minds of the time. Seeing the practical applications of his work, Banneker began publishing Benjamin Banneker's Almanac in 1792, and it was a wild success. It contained information on weather patterns, farming practices, and was basically a how-to guide for agricultural life. The Almanac also included political writings, such as a plan of a peace office for the United States, which caught the attention of Thomas Jefferson, and the two exchanged several letters. Banneker even implored Jefferson about the evils of slavery, advocating for abolition. When it came time for President Washington to appoint a commission to survey the site of the new capital, Washington, D.C., Jefferson made sure Banneker's name was on the short list. Banneker worked closely with French architect Pierre L'Enfant to plan the capital. But L'Enfant was notoriously difficult to work with and was known for his explosive temper. As a result, L'Enfant was dismissed from his post before planning could be completed. And in what could have been a devastating move, L'Enfant took a year's worth of the plans with him. Just when it seemed that the team would have to start from scratch, Banneker saved the day and the capital. In 2 days, Banneker recreated L'Enfant's designs entirely from memory. He redrew every street and stream and building, effectively saving the capital as we know it. Banneker died in 1806 at the ripe old age of 75. So next time you're in Washington, D.C., or the next time your dad refers you to the Farmer's Almanac for all the information you could ever need, remember that we owe that and so much more to Benjamin Banneker, the first African-American scientist.
The Tuskegee Airmen were the first group of African-American aviators to serve in the United States Armed Forces. and while they were discriminated against both within and outside of the Army, they are known today as some of the best pilots of World War II. During World War II, black Americans in many U.S. states were still subject to the Jim Crow laws, and the American military was racially segregated, as was most of the federal government. When he was running for a third term as U.S. President in 1940, Franklin D. Roosevelt promised to allow blacks to become military pilots. The War Department agreed to do that, but with the understanding that the black military pilots would be trained on a segregated basis and serve in their own segregated units. The Tuskegee program began officially in June 1941 with the 99th Pursuit Squadron at the Tuskegee Institute and Air Base. The unit consisted of 47 officers, 429 enlisted men, and was backed by an entire service arm. Tuskegee was chosen as the place for the first black military pilot training because Tuskegee Institute had already been training black civilian pilots. Tuskegee Institute lobbied for the contract to operate a primary flight school for black pilots. The region had more days of good flying weather than any other part of the country, and the area already had a segregated environment which was consistent with the segregated training. The name Tuskegee Airmen applied to not only the men who flew the fighter planes, but also the navigators, bombardiers, mechanics, instructors, crew chiefs, nurses, cooks, and other support personnel for the pilots. By April 1943, the 99th were finally considered ready for combat and were shipped out to Paris. By the end of February 1944, more graduates were ready for combat, and the all-black 332nd Fighter Group had been sent overseas with 3 fighter squadrons, the 100th, the 301st, the 302nd, and later to join the 99th. The 332nd Fighter Group was the only black fighter group, and it was the only one to have 4 squadrons instead of 3. That gave it more pilots and more airplanes than the average fighter group. The 99th Fighter Squadron flew 577 missions before joining the 332nd Fighter Group, and the 332nd Fighter Group flew 914 missions for a total of 1,491 combat missions flown by the Tuskegee Airmen. One of the major achievements that made the Tuskegee Airmen so popular was their good bomber protection rate, only losing a total of 27 bomber planes throughout their squadron's career, compared to the average 47 from other squadrons. Flying escort for heavy bombers, the 332nd earned an impressive combat record. The Allies called these airmen Red Tails, or Red Tail Angels, because of the crimson red paint on the tail of their planes. Today, with close to 300 airmen still alive, the Tuskegee Airmen are remembered in countless pop culture television shows and movies. And while the history books may not show much detail to their significance during World War II, they will always be remembered as the men who changed flying for colored people forever.
Let's get it, let's get it. I tell all my kids, go rake it up, break it down, be college bound. Them A's you rake it up. I said to rake it up. Them A's you rake it up. Go out and rake it up.